The tension between the West and China isn't just about trade wars or military bases. At its core, the two sides seem to operate on completely different moral software. They disagree not just on policy, but on what a human being fundamentally is, what rights they're owed, and who they answer to. Most analysts blame Confucianism or communism or history, but there's a deeper, more surprising answer, and it starts with Christianity. The entire foundation of Western liberal order, so human rights, individual dignity, rule of law, and freedom of conscience, didn't emerge from nowhere. These ideas have a direct philosophical lineage running through the Enlightenment, through the Reformation, and back into medieval Christian theology. The Western concept that every individual human being has inherent, inalienable worth is not a secular invention. It's a secularized theological one. It comes from the Christian idea that every person bears the image of God, the so-called imago Dei, and therefore has a dignity that no state, king, or collective can override. That single idea is the engine behind the West's entire value system. Now contrast that with the framework China operates from. The Chinese Communist Party draws on a much older cultural script, one where the individual exists in relation to the group, the family, and the state. Harmony, hierarchy, and collective stability are the highest values. Individual rights in this framework are not God-given absolutes. They're social agreements. They're granted by the state, conditional on behavior, and always subordinate to the collective good. This is why conversations between Western diplomats and Chinese officials so often feel like two people speaking different languages. They're not just disagreeing on policy, they're working from fundamentally incompatible assumptions about what a person is. And Beijing knows exactly where those Western assumptions come from. Christianity isn't just a religion to the CCP, it's a political threat. A person who believes their conscience answers to God has a loyalty that sits above the state and that is, by definition, incompatible with total party authority. This explains one of the most underreported stories in modern geopolitics: China's systematic suppression of Christianity. Since 2018, the CCP has intensified regulations on religious practice, removing crosses from church buildings, banning religious education for minors, and forcing churches to display the Chinese flag and install facial recognition cameras. State-approved churches must preach what the party calls Sinicization, essentially Christianity filtered through CCP ideology. This isn't just religious intolerance, it's strategic. The CCP understands, perhaps better than most Western commentators do, that Christian belief carries within it a seed of political dissent, the idea that there is a moral authority higher than Beijing. And here's the irony. The West has largely forgotten that its values are Christian in origin. European leaders invoke human rights and individual dignity while presiding over the most secular societies in human history. They've kept the fruit while quietly discarding the tree from which these values came from. This creates a peculiar vulnerability. When the West argues for human rights on the world stage, China's response is increasingly effective. That's your cultural framework, not a universal truth. And without the theological foundation, the West struggles to answer that charge. You can't defend the idea that human dignity is absolute if you've abandoned the framework that first made that claim. So here's what textbooks won't tell you. The West-China conflict isn't just a clash of economies or militaries, it's a clash of anthropologies. Two completely different answers to the question of what a human being is and who they ultimately belong to. The West's answer was shaped by Christianity, that the individual is sacred, conscience is sovereign, and no earthly power is absolute. China's answer is older and increasingly confident, that the individual is part of something larger, that harmony requires hierarchy, and that loyalty to the collective is the highest virtue. Understanding that divide doesn't just explain the news, It tells you why this tension isn't going away anytime soon, and why the decisions made in the next decade will determine which answer the rest of the world is asked to live by. Thank you for listening. This was a kind of different video from usual, but I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please come back next Friday for the next one. See you!